Hello, and welcome back to part 2 of an appropriately unhinged recap of Fifth Element fashion on Read the Care Tag. This podcast is about anything and everything fashion-related, for all of those who never grew out of playing dress-up, with a sprinkle of history, a dabble of pop culture, a healthy dollop of fashion obsession, and a pinch of philosophical questioning. I hope you enjoy the show. This episode, we'll be continuing our conversation about the cult classic film whose screen grabs dominate retrofuturistic Pinterest boards, one of my favorite movies of all time, and the inspiration for my Halloween costume last year, The Fifth Element. Now, if Mike's Mike wants to do an unhinged recap of the plot with me, I'll swim right over to Australia as fast as I can. But in this case, we'll be focusing on the fashion more than the plot. And while there will be visuals from the film if you're watching on YouTube, there shouldn't be any real spoilers. And with that, let's get into it. So last episode, we got to know a bit of Gaultier's story and broke down the film's fashion into several main elements which make up Jean Paul Gaultier's 23rd century world. Just to refresh you, these elements were 1. Expectation subversion. 2. References. 3. Revealing, textured, vibrant, and gimmicky styles are the standard fare of the 2200s fashion trends, which reflect the epitomized future of our consumerist world. In the first episode, we went over points 1 and 2 and closed out with a brief discussion of the film's stereotypical sci-fi brutes, the Mangalores. And while their natural form is more like a dog crossed with a toad on a humanoid weird body with clawed hands and feet, they are a departure from the typical because they're shapeshifters and can take on the form of regular humans. That leads us into Part 3, Provocateur Fashion Trends of Gaultier's 23rd Century. When the Mangalores are trying to sneak onto the cruise ship, they try to blend in as regular citizens. And this is what regular citizens are. They shapeshift into some pretty uniquely garbed characters. And this is what regular citizens are. One sports a brown triangle mesh top and a deep red shag vest, paired with a belted cargo kilt. Meanwhile, the second rocks a thong beneath a see-through neon green plastic skirt seamed in black in a white fur coat with a collar tipped in red and black feathers. These looks are on screen for mere moments, yet they live on forever in Pinterest boards everywhere. They show that in order to blend in, the Mangalores have to wear these provocative and subversive looks. This spaceport scene in the film is one of the shortest, yet it's rife with vintage briefcases, clear plastic folios litter the scene with spots of color, and transparent plastic coats are everywhere. Even here, Gaultier is determined to sprinkle that retro-futuristic fairy dust all over everything. Now, just before we move on to our star of the film, Leeloo, my favorite little side character looks come in the form of the ship mechanics. These skimpy stoner divas are slaying in their steampunk goggles, black mesh tops, and rubber orange overalls, tucked into giant rubber moon boot style stompers. While the mesh tops are reminiscent of Gaultier's personal work, I think he really was just having fun with these guys. Alright, now the moment you've all been waiting for. Can you believe it took this long to get here? Leeloo, played by Milla Jovovich. Now, quick spoiler alert, I need to give a little context, but it is kind of what's given to you in the first 5 minutes of the film, so skip if you really don't want to hear it. Leeloo is a supreme being and the human embodiment of the fifth element, which, when paired with the 4 elemental stones, is able to defeat the forces of evil. Evil which comes to Earth every 5 millennia. As the 5,000-year hourglass is coming to a close, the aliens who provided these things to protect Earth are on their way to do an interstellar drop-off of Leeloo and the stones. Unfortunately, they are intercepted by the villains of the movie, and the only thing that remains of the wreckage is Leeloo's arm. Earth scientists who find this use regenerative technology to regrow this supreme being. Now that we have that expositional context out of the way, I promise it's important to the costume. In fact, this look is unique in that Luc Besson and Mila Jovovich actually came up with the idea for it, although its realization, of course, is a credit to Gaultier. In an interview, Jovovich said this: "Luc and I began with talking about the costumes, and the whole idea of bandages just came out of our conversation, because it was like, well, what could I be wearing? I was playing a tech subject that people needed to have access to, but I was also a humanoid and a woman who needed a bit of modesty. So we had the idea of covering me with bandages, which Luc gave to Gaultier to design the outfit." Gaultier took this idea and ran with it. His experience in corsetry and playing with strappy but structural construction birthed Leeloo's first look. Using thermal bandages, the dress left very little to the imagination and provided a minimal modicum of modesty. While this might be viewed as classic sexualization of women in fashion, it tickles a memory in my mind that doesn't pertain to a woman. Rocky, from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I know, I've already talked about references from this film before, but hear me out. He too is a constructed, perfect being. He too has an extreme physique, and he too emerges from a tank clothed in only bandages, which in his case get progressively torn off of him. And while he emerges practically fully covered, by the end, he is nearly naked. Now, consider for a moment the implicit biases we have towards beauty. Both of these supreme beings must be supremely beautiful. But beauty is subjective, so whose perspective of beauty are we looking at? In the case of The Fifth Element, it's pretty evidently Luc Besson. He first wrote this story as a child, and it was his lifelong dream to create it. Now, I won't be going in too deep on him, because once again, he's not the loveliest fella. He's been accused of countless improprieties, cheating scandals, weird age gap relationships, and general sexualization of waifish young women in his films. So in this section, as we analyze the extremely revealing styles in this 23rd century world, we have to remember that while Gaultier designed the clothes, the world still largely belonged to Besson. And while the cast is considerably diverse, we see a marked lack of varied bodies. All neutral or positive characters, both alien and humanoid, are distinctly sexy and slim, with that stereotypical 90s supermodel look. And although some of the background characters do have some variety while remaining neutral, they are few and far between. And while revealing clothing is nothing new for Jean Paul Gaultier and the sci-fi genre in general, Gaultier had never limited his own models wearing those clothes to size 00, long before diversity was in style. And he has only continued this trend with his following work, including special crutches for Coco Rocha in his 2008 spring show, which, while they were combined with a mermaid look that restricted her legs, provide an example of the couture possibilities for fun accessibility devices, which are often ignored in the fashion world. While the film does have these flaws, I don't think Jean Paul Gaultier's use of revealing clothing arises from a sexual motivation. I believe the hyper-saturated world created in this film is just that, saturated with people, makeup, media, advertisements, everything. The color of the looks, the materials, the textures, and the involvement of sexuality all point to a comic bookified idea of what the future could look like. In the film, we see flying taxis embroiled in that unavoidable New York traffic, incessant noise, and the tinny neon light reflecting from advertisements. Despite the futuristic tint, is this really that different from modern-day New York? The saturated life of NYC today already makes it a city where people strive to stand out from the pack in whatever way they can. It's no surprise that movies often play on the trope of the small-town youth with big dreams overwhelmed by the craziness of the city that never sleeps. I think that in Gaultier's futuristic world, he envisioned this experience pushed to the limit. A place where people live in shoebox apartments, but their need for expression spills over the edges, creating a world of blurred lines and extremism. But ironically, the more people that are unique and extreme, the more like everyone else they are. If you consider jeans, which we discussed in episode 2, when they first began to be worn as casual clothing, they were revolutionary, almost inappropriate. To wear jeans, especially if they had some rips, was scandalous. Nowadays, even your grandma probably wears jeans. The more crazy there is, the more normal it becomes. Now, after that slight tangent, let's continue with the Leeloo analysis. Her iconic, sexy thermal bandage outfit doesn't last long. Leeloo, along with Corbin, our second main character, whose cab she falls into upon her escape from the resurrection lab, visit the priest tasked with being her contact on Earth, whose stellar look we'll discuss a bit later as well. Now, while at the priest's apartment, we get the iconic Chanel instant makeupizer goggle thing brand placement. It's basically a little mask that she puts up to her eyes that flashes, and all of a sudden, she's got a perfect smoky eye. This is another example of the gimmicky commercialization of this futuristic world. A gadget that deposits flawless makeup on you instantly. At this point, she also changes into the look she sports for the rest of the movie. A silky, ribbed crop tee matched with rubber perforated suspender harness and gold pants. Once again, this reminds me of the gold mini shorts sported by Rocky from Rocky Horror, but this time she is in a much more covered up look compared to him. Now, there are two parts of this look and the transition to this look I want to analyze. The fashion side and the symbolic side. Fashion-wise, the holes in the suspenders are reminiscent of Gaultier's dot print, which has been featured throughout many of his collections both prior and post this film. And the silky rib material belies the quality of this simple garment, as well as the general shiny, futuristic textures throughout the film. But what is the symbolism here? In my opinion, this outfit change is meant to reflect her shift from the born yesterday innocence to total awareness, a change she completes in mere moments. Critics of the film claim that she's a sexualized, childlike character due to her initial presentation and gibberish talk. However, to me, this is a pretty surface take. As Reddit user The Friendliest Giant puts it, Leeloo isn't nonverbal, she just doesn't speak English. She clearly talks at length with Father Cornelius and Mando Shiwin, explaining recent events and the next steps in her own mission. She also tells Corbin off at gunpoint no less for kissing her without consent, something the movie makes quite clear when Cornelius translates her words as being literally, never without my permission. She also isn't entirely childlike. While she is unfamiliar with a lot of human concepts in the film, like modesty and multi-passes, and appropriate single-serving portion sizes, it's clear that she is a competent adult in her own context. In addition to being able to stand up for her own consent, she's able to execute and follow through on the plan to retrieve the stones. A plan that seems like it would have worked flawlessly if both she and the diva hadn't been shot quite so much. The film sets her as a fish out of water, which limits her, but in as much as she can be expected to be in an alien context, she acquits herself as quite a reasonable agent on a specific mission. She is no more childish than, say, Tom Cruise in the Samurai Village in The Last Samurai, or Tim Allen on The Protector in Galaxy Quest. The same sequence in which her costume change happens, she meets the priest contact. Through his computer, she researches Earth and learns to speak English. Her costume change, new dark eye makeup, reflect her newfound awareness. They represent her metamorphosis into a wiser Leeloo, settling into her reality and refocusing on her purpose. Her new look reflects the same sort of no-nonsense, action hero seriousness as Corbin's, but just like their personalities, in a yin and yang way. Nothing identical, but somehow fitting together. Speaking of Corbin, remember his sexy rubber top? Once again, we note that even a more conservative person would sport such a revealing style. We also previously discussed our king, Ruby Rod, and while his looks aren't particularly revealing, they are brightly patterned, textured, and even accented with satin roses. A glance at his entourage shows us that they didn't miss the memo either, with sexy corsets under suit jackets. Provocative and textured patterns are present and highly favored. In the leopard look, we are treated to lackeys sporting bolo ties and open disco jackets, as well as contrast leopard collars on tailed waistcoats and leather zippered pants. It's clear that the silhouettes remain consistent for Ruby's crew, while the texture is changed. This group also reflects that statement I asserted earlier. The more crazily coordinated this group is, the more the details melt away and they become uniform. It took rewatching the scene several times before I even noticed half of the details there. Now, another mini collection. The air hostesses. The airline stewardesses of the cruise liner, on which much of the film's action occurs, are once again sporting that silky, bandagey style, which makes up two main variations of looks. One, a collared bustier with a 3/4 sleeve cropped jacket in a periwinkle blue, and the other, a mock-neck, short-sleeve bustier tee with crescent slice cutouts above the bustier cups, in a slightly deeper royal blue. Both are paired with miniskirts, and both are reminiscent of Gaultier's bullet bra corsets, worn most famously by Madonna. These looks are paired with matching boots, pillbox hats, accented with tiny wings, and lacquered white bob wigs. Looking at this group of ladies, a couple of things come to mind. First off, their scantily clad outfits fit into our previously discussed world. It marks that, despite this being their work uniform, these styles have been normalized. It also illustrates how little traditionally female service jobs have changed. It might not be Hooters, but if you take a look at modern flight attendant outfits, they're not too far off. They must lose identity and become a uniform. Each hostess is any hostess, ready to assist with your every need. While the looks are beautiful and the textures make me want this top on my body right now, I'm also struck with how evident the message of this ensemble comes across. Each hostess is any hostess, ready to assist with your every need. And we see this echoed in the futuristic McDonald's drive-thru as well, with adorable sweetheart neckline dresses rimmed by the golden arches, matching red wigs, and Mick Pillbox hats, while aesthetically rich, echo the same notes. And as the employee leans down to the driver, her golden arches on display, is there any way to argue that this uniform isn't created for the male gaze? Now, I would like to make a distinction. I really don't think that Jean Paul Gaultier was here to sexualize the ladies for the male gaze. A, he is super duper openly gay and has regularly embraced rejecting societal limitations of women and their bodies, but B, I think he's smarter than people may give credit for. He isn't just making something pretty when it comes to these clothes. Think about it. The picture of New York that we have described, in this world where every brand is vying for consumption and people are forced to commodify any and every part of themselves in order to buy success. Would a grade A consumption-pilled brand like McDonald's not stoop to the same marketing tactics as Hooters to remain relevant? Both of these uniform looks have something else in common too. The pillbox-esque buns with McDonald's M's pinned to them and the mod silhouettes continue to harken back to Jean Paul Gaultier's own start in retrofuturistic fashion. Throughout this film, a hairstyling pattern also emerges. Pixie cuts and bobs reign supreme, usually in wig form, and the evil Zorg's receptionist is no different. Although we only see her for a few moments, she really adds a lot to the film. A quintessential receptionist, her teal hair is actually a feather pussycat wig and what appears to be a matching feathery shrug. We see her bored at her desk, buzzing people in and out of meetings with her boss. Despite the manner of folks coming through this criminal building, she is unbothered, casually painting her nails with another futuristic fashion contraption, which seems to auto-change the color of your nail when your finger is inserted into the small black tube. This is another iconic look circulated on Tumblrs and Pinterest galore that held the spotlight for mere seconds. Once again, no matter the person, no matter the world, the sphere, the job, everyone in the fifth element is striving to stand out, and that is just the standard of this world's fashion. Now, finally, some honorable mentions in this Provocateur category are the concert goers. We have this group attired in Baroque-style looks with the focal point being a person sporting a lace short-sleeve top and a mop of curly white hair, reminiscent of white powdered wigs. This person is being doted on by several girls in black leather bondage-style dresses, whose necklines not only harken back to Leeloo's own initial look, but also with the central character in this group being a non-stereotypical person with a non-rail-thin body, also dressed in a revealing manner, It reinforces that this type of fashion is the fashion for everyone in this world. Then we have this shot where the woman on the right is wearing what appears to be a Glinda-esque gown, poofy in a robin egg blue, complete with a golden headpiece that has hair like tendrils sunbeaming away from her head and then draping down over her shoulders. Standalone icons. There are a couple notable costumes that don't fit neatly into these three categories, but I felt merited discussion as well. First, Father Vito Cornelius, the earthly priest tasked with maintaining readiness for the inevitable evil and assisting the fifth element in its destruction. On first glance, he has an immediate sense of religiosity about him. Without any specific markers of any specific religion, he still has that wide-eyed gaze of a man with true faith. Aside from Surrey and Holm's great performance, there are a few things that contribute to this in his attire. His look melds a Catholic cleric's high collar with the robes of historic and futuristic wise men. His look even mirrors the wise guide aesthetic of Obi-Wan Kenobi from Star Wars. However, the largest element that tells us that this is a humble religious man is the comparably simple look and natural materials. When compared to the other characters we have talked about, his color palette is muted, clothes practical, and reflecting a humble but active choice towards tradition. His vest looks like scratchy wool, top like plain cotton, and the general styles and patterns seem to be antiquated. The open-faced honesty with which Holm plays the character and the visual parallels to the beloved Obi-Wan lets us know that this character is trustworthy, reliable, and a true believer. Next, we have Diva Plava Laguna. The diva, surname inspired by the Plava Laguna resort in Croatia where Luc Besson vacationed, also means Blue Lagoon. And in her blue skin suit, she certainly fits the name. Her look is striking, with a beautiful humanoid face, paired with an octopus-like protrusion from the back of her skull and tentacles dangling from various parts of her. She is described as a combination of all species and another supreme being. Perhaps this is what inspires her smooth body, a blend of life. Her only garment is this harness-like piece that stretches across her back up to a collar and headpiece, and down around her hips like a belt. It's made of a dark bluish-silver metal, although it might be black with the blue simply reflecting off of her. It is covered with a pattern in relief, which I hesitantly call Baroque-inspired, perhaps to evoke a touch of timelessness. Whatever the true inspiration was, it doesn't matter. Gaultier sought references not only in history, film, and media, but he also pulled from reality. Jean Paul Gaultier credits his design inspirations to be real people on the street wearing their everyday costume. And this makes me appreciate him as a designer even more. If you've watched some of the previous episodes, you might know that I view every day as a new opportunity to dress up as the me who woke up this morning. In part, this is what draws me to this film. With futuristic McDonald's employees and regular people waiting in queues at the spaceport, no one seems like a filler character. If the camera chose to follow any one of the people in any scene, you would surely be going on an adventure. What makes these characters truly come to life are their clothes. In my day-to-day job, part of my role is to come up with the quote-unquote uniform of real characters in a story narrative. The narrative team gives me a description of a character, and I have to come up with how that would reflect in the clothes they wear, and how they wear them. It's a fun new challenge to add to my repertoire of designing skills, and rewatching this film really showed me how beautifully it can be done. If you haven't seen part 1, make sure to check it out for a discussion of Bruce Willis's character and countless other iconic looks. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you so much for joining me on Read the Care Tag. For photos of some of the stuff I talked about today, make sure to follow the Instagram @ReadTheCareTag, as well as follow me @MayaGinsburg. Subscribe if you're on YouTube, as well as follow and review the show if you're on an audio platform to let me know what you think of my rambling. As always, sources are linked in the description, and I hope you have a lovely week.